Good morning.
Bonjour, bonjour. J'espère que vous avez...
I hope that you have all got your headphones. The first 10 minutes are going to be in French, and then the plenary that will follow will be in French and English. So for all of you who don't understand one of those languages, you will need to have your headset.
J'espère que vous avez fait...
I hope that you have all had a good night. Whilst we are waiting for people to arrive, just a little story to help you relax a bit. Toto is a friend. He goes to school, and somebody asked him, "What time did you wake up this morning?" And I could ask you all the same question, but do you know what Toto said? He said, "At least 1 hour before the beginning of the meeting. I hope that you have been able to wake up a bit beforehand." The idea of these first 10 minutes in the morning that we are also going to have tomorrow and Wednesday is to try and give us an opportunity to talk about the way in which initiatives of change has affected our lives. Changing ourselves so that the world can change. So understanding everything that goes on inside us so that we can then help our society, our family, and every sector that we are a part of. Don't worry, it's just the organisatory committee that are arriving. So this morning we have asked Antoine and Jules from France to come and speak to you about some things that have inspired them to inspire you. So perhaps in listening to them we're going to find something that will resonate within us. Antoine. Hello everybody. In 2023. It seems a bit incredible that I came here for the very first time 49 years ago. I have also had 35 years of professional life at the heart of an automotive company. So I would like to make a link between these two things. When I came here the first time, I was a teenager, an adolescent, and my family had signed us all up to the family conference because at the time there was a family conference. There was 4 pages written about the 4 criteria. This was about the 4 pillars that we follow. They said that we should try and make sure that the things we do in our life align with these 4 pillars. On the first page there was something that was very pertinent, and that was about the relationship with my parents. So I spoke to them because they were here as well. I found it was difficult because my mum was always asking me to tidy my room, so it was a bit difficult. But we were able to build trust between each other. And it's on this theme of the conference that the teachings that I have learnt here in Caux have been a huge advantage in my career. So in the automotive industry, there are a lot of people who work. But I also wanted to be involved in economics and in the jobs market. Very quickly within the automotive industry, we had it all starts with production. It wasn't very modernised at this time, it was very simple. So more than 100 people that I had around me were all in charge of the production factory. To give you an idea, we had to be very quick with the work we were doing, and it soon rose up to 1,000 people who were working there. And we had specialised people such as technicians. So what I learned rather quickly is what we call in French delegation. So delegation in English, it's also not a direct term. So delegation also requires trust. Delegation is one of the key elements of management because it allows a manager to give jobs to other people and to divide jobs which are rather complex into smaller parts and to give them to people within their team, for example, to technicians. This allows people who are receiving the orders to then progress, to learn within their job. There is a lot more risk when it comes to responsibility, but actually everybody is able to make the most of this and come out better. Maybe this seems like something that's quite difficult to understand, because even if you ask the question in Google, you would have thousands of responses. People are trying to find the correct formula. So when we look at these responses and this advice that's given to us, it's rather technical. But often what is missing is that we need trust. And how can we have trust? So as I discovered with my parents in Caux, the basis of trust is transparency. It's not the only thing, but it is one of the key elements. The manager must have mutual trust in you. Because if I'm going to give someone a job to do, if I'm going to delegate something to someone, I need to believe that they are going to be able to do it. It would be even more difficult if I gave someone a job and then they weren't able to complete it or do it correctly. So the person who is being delegated to also needs to trust in their manager that they are going to give them things that they can do, and that the jobs they're given are not going to be too complex or difficult. So there is a common factor between the two. It's difficult to live with complete honesty. But if we do that, it will simplify our life. Today, to say things how they are also saves us time. And the second part of the conference is to remain committed to what you're doing. I experienced this within the last few years of my work with Citroën. We were cooperating with a competitor, and it was an Italian competitor. And French engineers often think that Italians perhaps aren't very good at their jobs, and that once they finish the meetings they would always change their mind anyway. And it wasn't always that we wanted to get things wrong, because just like with companies and with life in general, we make mistakes. There is resistance, there is procrastination. And errors are often the source of dividing people. But wanting to do better is important. Saying, oh, we've got a better idea, we could do this in a better way. But what happens is the partner then worries and asks themselves, why is this happening? Why are they might be asking, why are they not doing what they said they were going to do? They might be trying to find advantages of this cooperation and this partnership. But because there is this gap between the promises and the realities, this could become a problem for people. With my Italian colleague, luckily we were able to have a good relationship over the last few years, and we had a certain level of mutual understanding. It was when we understood each other that we were able to talk together. This is often a great resource for all of our colleagues. So weaknesses on an individual level also affect weaknesses within a team. When we're looking at an intercultural perspective, we can see that trust is important. There is an Italian proverb that says to trust is good, but to not trust in someone is even better. But we learnt that we can start to have trust in each other, slowly but surely. I don't know what you think, but I hope that you're going to have the time to exchange your ideas and opinions upon this little story. Thank you. Thank you very much, Antoine. He's here over the next few days, so if you want to know more, please do speak to him. Now we have got the team who are going to lead this plenary session this morning. Imad.
Good morning, friends. Good morning, Caux. Good morning, TID. Good morning. I hope you've all had a good rest last night. Yeah? Those who may have it first time, maybe not. Usually I find in my case a first night anywhere is still not as good as the second or the third. Friends, my name is Imad Karam. I am the Executive Director of Initiatives of a Change International. I'll be moderating this morning's plenary. Just a reminder about Initiatives of a Change. For those who may still be getting to know us, we are an international organization. We are an international network. We are also a global movement of people of diverse cultures and backgrounds, as you can see. We are committed to inspiring, equipping, and connecting change makers. The vision is a just and peaceful world. Integral to the work of Initiatives of a Change is a commitment to strengthen the moral and spiritual foundation of society. One of our key focus areas is ethical leadership. And so we seek to empower leaders to act with integrity, to serve unselfishly, and to be agents for a change. Before I invite our speakers for the morning, I'll just say that this forum is a result of a collaboration between Initiatives of Change International and Initiatives of Change Switzerland, the Caux Foundation. And as many of you know, this is the second part of the Caux Forum, which focuses on trust and integrity in democracy. So just to help us set the scene, I'm going to invite my colleague Louis Gardiner to help us in a process of co-creating a context in which we can engage and change together. And after that, we'll hear from our main speakers. Louis, please. Thank you. Do you need the microphone? This one.
I need to take a breath. I might die otherwise. It's been quite a ride to get here, and we've been a very small team for very many months. But what occurred to me several days ago was what was important for us here is we're talking about democracy. And democracy might mean many things to many people. And I want to offer a quote so that I can then give a little context here. And it's from a woman called Mary Parker Follett. And she was alive in the late 1800s and died in 1933. And only many, many years later was her teachings recovered by many management and leadership gurus. But she wrote on democracy, and there's a quote here: "Democracy is not brute numbers. It is a genuine union of true individuals. The essence of democracy is creating. The technique of democracy is group organization." And that says something about the whole flow and design of our plenaries. So what I want you to hold is this is not an audience and very important people talking. This is people giving their time to catalyze the conversations, not only between these people here, but to catalyze the conversations between all of you. And so consider yourself participants, not passive audience. And you will see many resources on your table, and I will talk about those a little bit later. But to enable us to be participants who are co-creating a context for engaging and changing together, I want you to hold one principle in mind. And I know this phrase doesn't translate easily into English. It does in German, and I'm not sure about some of the other languages, but I will distill it down to two very simple things. So we have a personal and collective responsibility. And this phrase, safeguard my own trustworthiness. You'll find a document on Hoover that says a little bit more about this and puts it in the context of what we in IofC talk about, living the values of IofC. So I encourage those of you who know little about IofC, you might want to go to the workshop that talks about this, but you can get this document. But the two essences I want you to hold during the plenary sessions and the workshops and the community groups is this: share only what is mine to share. That is you safeguarding what other people may share, which may have risk attached to it. So the invitation is you may hear some deep, profound experiences you yourself have never had. If you go down the mountain and say, oh, this person, that person said this, this, and this, you could potentially be putting somebody at risk. So talk about what your experiences are. And the second point, Share only what I am willing, able, and ready to share. And that's you safeguarding you, taking care of you. And if you hold both of those and the spirit of listening to people who may have different experiences to you, different views and opinions to you, and if you listen long enough to enough people who are different to you, you will be changed. I will be changed by opening up to the diversity in the room. Imad.
Thank you, Louis. May I now invite our three contributors, please, to come and join me here. Mr. Yukihisa Fujita from Japan, Her Excellency Mrs. Hadezitu Yakuba Orsini, please, and Mr. Declan O'Brien, please. Thank you. You could choose to speak from the chair or standing here. I think we will start by having a contribution from Declan O'Brien. You can see the bios on the screen, but Declan is the senior program at the Kofi Annan Foundation, and his department is elections and democracy. And we thought we could start with Declan, who would give us an overview of some of the trends that have been happening around the issue of democracy and democratization. Declan, please.
Thank you, Imad, and good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. We're actually based just down the road in Geneva, but this is the first time I've made it up to Caux, so it's great to finally be here after all these years. And as Imad said, I am with the Elections and Democracy team at the Kofi Annan Foundation, and we have, over the years, had the opportunity to work in support of elections in various places around the world. So what I'll try and do today is look at sort of two key trends that we've seen in all of these different places. But let me start first by just explaining a bit that we are not a sort of a technical election organization. We don't do electoral observation. We don't provide advice to electoral management bodies in terms of how to manage a vote, how to update your voter registry, whether or not to have a parallel voter tabulation. We look, sort of taking a step back, at the broader political context in which elections take place. We look fundamentally at the issue of electoral integrity. And that's why I'm quite sort of happy to see the link with the question of the panel in terms of why trust, because integrity, and particularly electoral integrity, really comes down to two things. It comes down to trust, and it comes down to transparency. Transparency in decision-making, transparency in processes. And when it comes to trust, really what you're talking about is trust in politicians and trust in processes. And those are the two things I'd like to talk a little bit about this morning. Unfortunately, to get us off on a very optimistic start to the week, the trends in trust in terms of politicians and processes are unfortunately both pretty bad at the moment. It's both steadily on the decline. When it comes to processes, democracy is absolutely more than just elections, but elections are fundamental to democracy. You cannot have a sustainable, healthy democracy without good elections. And unfortunately, elections themselves are under a lot of pressure and scrutiny at the moment. What you really want to see is people who go out and vote, who accept the result of that vote, and then they go back and vote again the next time around, even if the outcome of the first election wasn't what they wanted, even if their guy or candidate didn't win. Because they understand that even if they didn't get the result they wanted, the process was credible. They had an opportunity to have a say in how their country was going to be governed and by who, and in that election, they were able to come together with other citizens to debate, to discuss, to identify a shared vision of the world and go in that direction. And to do that, you need elections that are largely free of irregularities. You need them to be professionally and competently managed. You need them to be overseen by people who are perceived to be independent. And in many places, we don't have that, and a number of other factors that you need as well. And when you don't have that, people don't go and vote. At the core of this, of course, is electoral management bodies. They are the ones who are charged with delivering elections with integrity. And I think one of the things that we within the sort of global democracy and electoral support community need to look at is a lot more support to electoral management bodies, not just in terms of resources, capacity, and knowledge, but political cover. Because it is the oldest trick in the playbook that if you want to manipulate the outcome of an election or if you want to call it into question, you attack the electoral management body that's responsible for delivering those elections. So that's one of the sort of the key challenges that we see in terms of the lack of trust in electoral processes. The second issue, of course, is the lack of trust in politicians. And here the news isn't much better. I think there's been any number of polls over the last 2 years, let's say, that make it clear that politicians are still and remain amongst the least trusted group of people in the world. And there are, unfortunately, reasons for that. You know, people go out and they select candidates and they vote for them based on specific things, based on a sense that they have a good character, that they share your values, that they will be responsible and can be trusted to deliver a certain platform or set of policies. And most importantly, that they're going to represent your interests and defend and uphold the values that are central to democracy. And in any number of places that we've been working, that simply isn't the case. Corruption scandals, just a basic failure to deliver on citizens' aspirations in terms of democracy, socioeconomic growth, whatever it may be, mean that politicians, there's a lot of a lack of faith in them at the moment. And one of the particular challenges that we've seen is when you have elected officials who come to power through completely legitimate means. You know, they win an election, it's free, it's fair, it's an accurate representation of what the people want. And then they get in power and they spend as much time trying to consolidate and stay in power as they do actually delivering for their citizens. And I think my honorable colleague will talk a little bit about this situation in West Africa lately. We've done a little bit of work there, and it's by far not the only region where you see a number of leaders who try and extend their mandates by changing the constitutions and getting a third term, for example, which completely erodes trust among citizens and makes it very clear that they are using democracy to get to autocracy. One of the key elements across both of those is the role that young people have to play. Because increasingly it is clear that young people have very little trust in politicians and do not really see why they should be engaging in formal traditional political processes like elections, because they're just not delivering for them. Now, in some areas that's a big problem. In other countries where young people account for the vast majority of your population, that's a huge issue. We've been doing some work on how you engage and mobilize young people, but one thing I do want to say straight away is that the notion of youth apathy is something that we have a huge problem with, because there is a tendency to think that young people aren't voting and therefore they don't care. Young people aren't voting because they have seen time and time again that elections do not get them where they need to go. That is why young people are not voting. It is not because they do not care. That brings me, I think, to one of the key points that we need to consider when it comes to democracy and the state of democracy today. As I said, democracy is more than just elections, but elections are still the primary mechanism that gives citizens an option to engage in democracy. Here in Europe, the last 5 years or so, we've had what's called this deliberative wave, where there have been a number of efforts to increase participation through things like citizens' assemblies, direct mechanisms where groups of citizens come together, debate an issue, and put forward policy recommendations. It started in Ireland, and because I'm Irish, I have to say that it was the best model, but it is the best model. And since then, it's happened on a number of levels throughout Europe. You know, small citizens' assemblies on climate in Belgium, on drugs again in Ireland, on climate in France, and they're doing it now at the European level as well. And it is, I think, perhaps the most promising way we have to open up democracy to the citizens and give them more trust because they will be more engaged in the process. There is, of course, I think beyond that, a need to strengthen electoral management bodies. I think, as I said, we need a lot of support there. And to leave you on a really uplifting note, when it comes, I was at the ITU conference on artificial intelligence last week, or the week before, and there was 1,000 or so people there, and no shortage of people looking at AI and health, AI and agriculture, AI, this, that, and the other. There was, I think, one other person there who was looking at and talking about AI and democracy. And this is going to be a huge challenge for us going forward, because artificial intelligence has an enormous potential to erode what little trust is left in politicians and political processes. It is a huge, completely separate topic that we could spend an entire week talking about in and of itself. So I don't want to necessarily get into it now, but I do want to mention it because it's going to be, I think, going forward, one of the biggest challenges that we face. So that was a little bit the tour du table. I know we'll get into some of these issues in more detail, but I'll leave it there for now if I can, Imad.
Thank you, Declan. Thank you. It was really helpful to get that overview and sadly to be reminded that the trend is going in the wrong direction. And we need to do what we can to make things better. As you can see on the projection on the screen, so we're trying just to really set the state or the stage for the conversation for the next 3 days. And we do want to cover why trust and integrity in democracy, why now and why here. So with that, we'll go to our next speaker, Her Excellency Madame Hadizutu Yakuba Ossini. She is Niger's Minister for Mines. And she will speak in French, so make sure you got your headsets on if you don't understand French. Would you like to speak from here or from the stage?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Imad. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to start by thanking those who have welcomed me here today. It's my first time in Caux. It's my first time in this forum. I would like to thank Mr. Meunier for the assistance they have provided so that I can participate in this exchange. It's true that it's not been easy for me to find the time, but I have absolutely no regret being here today. With the film that we saw yesterday, we started to see the challenges. Now we have a place where we can talk, we have a place where we can exchange. We can also have good things that have come from this. So talking about democracy, I think that we need to have a look at the Kofi Annan Foundation, and we need to look at the electoral process. I come from Niger, a country in the heart of Western Africa. A country which is surrounded by many countries which are at a loss when it comes to the democratic process. This is the experience that I would like to share with you today. We say that democracy is the power of people. Why are there people who are trying to destroy this process? Why are there regimes that go against democracy? So all around us here, we've got people with many different experiences. The speech on democracy by François Mitterrand, and we have also talked about multi-partism. I have come from this process. I am engaged in politics in a socialist country. We need to fight for democracy for the well-being of the people. We need to fight against democracy, and we need to look at the progress that nations are making. Since 1995, we have had a democratic process, but there have already been 3 coups d'état. We are still living in this situation. But in Niger, we can say that we have observed a certain level of stability. After the last 2 mandates, the president has chosen to respect democracy. But he's also decided to respect the fundamental law of the constitution and to say that the mandate is only renewable once. So that makes our elections free and transparent. So today we can say that this party is on their 3rd term. But there are many other things too. Interruptions from armies. Why are people not trusting in democracy? Why do people want such a big change now? These are the things that we haven't been able to address before. If we can't respect the commitments, then people won't trust in us. So it is important to speak about values again, but also to make sure that we are being held to our commitments. Because some people who are elected simply forget about their previous commitments that they talked about. Also, within this process, as a woman, I have also tried to put an emphasis on democratic engagement of women. How is it possible that we have got so many traditions but we are still prevented from participating in public life? I think that the best thing to do is to talk about women and talk to men. So this is what I'm trying to do. We are trying to always be at the forefront to represent the voices of women. We are trying to put forward proposals. We have to put forward 10 people, and I am going to try and put forward 10 women. But this is not something that is easy to do because, first of all, we must believe in ourselves. I often hear women say to me, "No, I'm not able to do this." But if I can do it, then someone else can do it. So we need to believe in ourselves, because no matter the person who is elected, if they don't believe in themselves, there won't be anybody else that will believe in them. And if people don't follow their commitments, then there won't be any democracy and there won't be any progress for the nation. Women need to show that their participation should be equal to men, and this is also important. The second aspect that I've tried to talk about is my position as a minister. We say that democracy is also transparency. So how, as a minister, can I put this into place? How can I make sure that we are following our values in a sector that is not really including many women? Women are put in ministerial posts, just to support their social status. There are very rarely women in strategic democratic posts. That is why I am in this position. I am continuing to learn, but what I want to bring to this sector is another way of governing. To fight against corruption. Since I've arrived, I've said that we need to work in a transparent way. So I decided that the role of Minister of Mines would be good to do this, so that everybody can have access. I've also said that everything needs to be public. Miners should not be working alone. Everything needs to be mediated. This is also a way to show a strategic sector that it can be governed in a different way. And I think that this is credible to governance. We need to be able to show that transparency is possible. People are now knocking on Niger's door to take advantage of our resources. I think that if every minister tries to govern in a different way, then we are going to render democracy more credible. This means that over the next few elections, more people are going to vote. We need to believe in what we are doing, and we need to show that what we are doing is going to help the well-being of the population, and we must show this through transparency. Just as my colleague said, young people are important, women are important. Women are hugely important because they're at the heart of families. It's also true that within families we are able to create values that are then going to be transferred in one's professional life. So there we go. That's the first part that I would like to contribute today to Trust in Democracy. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame. Thank you, and it's really important that you have highlighted the role of women, just like Declan highlighted the question of youth and youth apathy. Both important, both groups being very important to democracy and to the future of a healthy society. We'll move swiftly to our third speaker, Mr. Yukihisa Fujita from Japan, who has had probably a long life, you call it, long time commitment, relationship with Initiatives of a Change and with its predecessor named Moral Rearmament. But he's also had a long political career that saw him being elected twice to the lower house, I think, and twice to the upper house, and serving as Deputy Minister of Finance. And I think the last time I met you in Japan, you were the shadow foreign minister, if I'm correct in my memory, in opposition. So, Yuki, would you like to speak from here or from the podium, please?
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation for me to be able to give a speech. Picture that you saw of my face was 20 years ago. Anyway, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact what happened in 1950. In 1950, as you can see, a delegation of 70 Japanese came to this MRA Conference Center at Caux. Initiatives of change used to be known as MRA. And you can see the delegation of 72 arriving at Geneva Airport. As you can see, it's not Japan Airlines. No Japan Airlines was operating, and General MacArthur, the head of Occupation Army, allowed the first big delegation to be allowed to leave the country. That's how they landed. And you can see on the right, a mayor of Hiroshima, governor of Hiroshima, mayor of Nagasaki, and governor of Nagasaki, the two cities that atomic bombs dropped. And this delegation included Mayor Hamai of Hiroshima City and 7 members of Japanese parliament. When they arrived at the building here, Japanese flag was shown and Japanese song was sung at a time when you are not allowed to raise Japanese flag in Japan because it was under the occupation. So that moved many Japanese, I was told. They saw the dramatic reconciliation between the Germans and the French in this room, I was told. From here, they went to see the Pope in Italy, Chancellor Adenauer in Germany, and French Foreign Minister Schuman in France. On their left, Konrad Adenauer right at the bottom. Then the right on the top is Mr. Nakasone, youngest member of parliament, who later became the prime minister. Mayor Hamai was a Christian. He made a cross out of a tree at Hiroshima. So he gave this cross to the mayor of London in this picture, and mayors of New York and other places. For those of you who may know, Mrs. Soma, whose father gave cherry trees to Washington, D.C., is in the back of that picture on the right. Then the delegation went to the United States, and 2 Japanese politicians did apologize in the Congress of the United States. For the first time, foreigners were allowed to speak in the Congress, I was told. Then Mayor Hamai decided to make a monument in Hiroshima after he and others went to the cemetery of unknown soldiers in Arlington. After his return to Japan, to Hiroshima, he made inscription, "Sleep in peace, we shall not make the same mistake again," meaning Japan, as well as the United States, was responsible for the bomb. Against criticism of why Japan was also responsible, Mayor replied, "I was bombed myself. I felt that this might be the end of the world. It was not to inquire who was responsible, but to have a strong thought that this horrible thing should never happen again." A bit dark here. It's more light.
Back a little.
That's very good. Thank you.
While I'm here,
Now, in May this year, a summit meeting of the leaders of 7 Western economies was planned in Hiroshima, including the USA, UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Canada, and Germany. I thought that this story behind this inscription of the visit by Mayor Hamai to those victor nations and defeated nations in 1950 that now make up those 7 nations has to be told to the 7 leaders. Former Foreign Minister Nakasone, who is the chairman of a members of parliament group to support IofC in Japan, and the son of former Prime Minister Nakasone, who had been in the same delegation as you saw the picture, took me to see the Prime Minister now, just before the summit. So on your left, the delegation in front of the Congress. Then on your right, a son of former Prime Minister, former Foreign Minister, the left, with the Prime Minister, second from the left, and myself. We met. And in addition to the story behind the inscription, I suggested to the Prime Minister to use a proper English translation of it. The thing is that Mayor or the city of Hiroshima used the translation as, "We shall not repeat the evil instead of mistake." So I said to the Prime Minister that some of those G7 nations who have nuclear weapons would not like to be described as evil at a time when President Putin justifies the war in Ukraine as fighting against the evil of Satanism. Eventually, a Japanese diplomat, maybe the next picture, translates the word as mistake instead of evil. When the mayor now explained to those 7 leaders. Maybe the next picture, please. Whoever is doing. Next picture, please. Yes, so on your left, the mayor was explaining about the meaning of this inscription to those 7 leaders. You can see Biden, Macron, and so on. And eventually, a Japanese diplomat, who is there, a lady, who translates the word as mistake instead of evil, when the mayor explained the word to the 7 leaders. Prime Minister Kishida explained the spirit behind it on various occasions. The result of it is shown in the words written by President Biden in the guest book at the Peace Memorial as follows. President Biden says, or wrote, "May the stories of this museum remind us all of our obligations to build a future of peace. Together, let us continue to make progress toward the day when we can finally and forever rid the world of nuclear weapons. Keep the faith." So magic of MRA, or Initiatives of Change in 1950, was shown to the leaders of G7. And the spirit of IofC was conveyed to those 7 leaders, as well as those leaders from the EU, UN, Ukraine, India, Brazil, South Korea, Indonesia, Australia, Union of Comoro, and Cook Islands, who were in Hiroshima together. You can see President Zelensky also is a prime minister in front of this monument. So I can say that what happened in 1950 here. behind the words of Hiroshima, now conveyed to the leaders who met in Hiroshima in May. And this is something that we should be carrying for the trust and integrity of the world, which is very much missing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fujita. What a history. I was just imagining those Japanese delegations who came after the war to the United States and here to Caux, Switzerland. And also, I saw some pictures and looked into the history. The first 100 Germans to leave Germany after the war came here to Caux with special permission from the American occupation, I guess, at the time. So lots of history in this place, and let's see what little or more we can do to make history for the future. Friends, this is a forum, so we would like to make it a forum, as Louis explained earlier. So I'd like to invite her back to facilitate just some interactions on the table, and then we'll come back and have some further interaction with the panelists. But we'll all now do some work on the tables. Louis, please.
So maybe before we launch into the next bit, where you all get a chance to share and talk and meet each other, let's have a moment of quiet to let some of what you've heard begin to distill and make some sense in you that may not yet form into words. So a moment of silence, of quiet. Thank you. I noticed in those few moments something rising in me, and a recognition and a deep acknowledgement to our speakers. You have taken us to places and parts of the world. You have taken us to the past, and you have brought our minds to the present and the future. And what I want to invite all of you to do now at your tables is you will have discovered some resources cluttering up the top of your table. Well, now's the time to put your other materials on the bottom of your table and reach for your resources. And on it, you will find, first of all, a map. Not yet. So, if you don't have a map on your table, stick your hand up, and somebody from the, you could.
One important thing, the thing under the map needs to be removed, but because the ink goes through.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. There was a white flag flapping from the back. And it was a warning. If you could please take the white tablecloth from underneath the map, because when you write on the map, ink might go through and spoil the cloth. Yes, so remove the cloth and put it underneath the table. It's okay. So what we're experiencing right now is the wonderful example of how no one person can think of everything. And then we get a different perspective. Are we protecting the table or the cloth? So here we are, engaging in dialogue and sharing different perspectives. But for now, how can we ever do anything with another if we do not first meet them? So this is an opportunity for you all to meet each other, very simply, to introduce yourselves and where you live. So I know many of us, and myself included, would say I'm from somewhere and I live somewhere else. So where you live. And you're going to use your initials to put yourself on the map. Now, some places may be very small, so you might need to put your initials in the ocean and draw a line to the dot where you live. Okay? So introduce yourselves, where you live, put yourself on the map in your place on Earth. And when you've done that, have a very short conversation about what I love about my place on Earth. And I'm only going to give you about 7 to 10 minutes because we want to make sure that you get time to dive into deep issues and then to come back to talk with our plenary speakers. So around 7 to 10 minutes, so be precise. So hello everybody again. I know you're midstream of your conversation, and I would like to ask you to pause your conversation. That's an invitation to pause your conversation for a moment. We've got, it's lovely to hear all your voices. You may not quite have finished, but we want to put in place the next bit of this exercise. And I encourage you to continue the conversation out with this session. But I'm going to show you where we're going. So Olga is going to stand up and give you a sense of what we're aiming for in this session. You'll have seen different colored pieces of paper and sellotape. And you will notice here, we've got an initial pointing to a dot on a map. And down at the bottom, we have the initial with the person's name, the place, the city or the town, and the country. So that's one bit, and I want to explain these colored pieces of paper. So each of you take a different color. Hopefully there should be 5 different colors because we'd set up for 5 people. And this is your task. We're looking at this question. So excuse me turning there. What is going on in my place on earth that shows that trust and integrity in democracy is at risk in my nation, in my neighborhood, at my workplace, in my home? So depending on what you do in life and where the focus of your attention and activity is, you might be working in the global space, or it may be things that are happening in your home. It's where democracy starts. So the question is there to remind you, and this is your task. You're going to share one thing that worries you about trust and integrity in democracy in your place on earth. I know there will be many things, but pick one. Pick a colored piece of paper for you, and you should find a marker pen to write that issue simply as you can. Add your name, maybe in a small, thinner pen, and your email if you want people to connect with you, or to invite that possibility. And then what you see here, you have sellotape. And so you can put your issue on your map so that all of you can see. And what we will do at the end of the session is to take that and we will put them onto the boards at the back. So you can get a chance to see what other people in the room are concerned about and wanting to galvanize themselves about. Okay. We're giving you about 12 minutes. So if you focus your mind and have the conversation and get it on the paper, and then Imad will draw us to close at a point where we can start to have a conversation about what's going on in your place and invite the speakers up here to contribute and have a dialogue with you. So 12 minutes from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's come to an end of the conversation, please. I know you all need more time, but we don't have a lot more time, so let's close down, please, in a few seconds. Share the microphone. If you just... So thank you for engaging in this exercise. I hope you found it interesting, maybe rich, maybe not enough. But let's just gather our thoughts. I think there's another microphone, and I'd like just to get the rest of the time. Let me see how much more time we have. About 13 more minutes to pick up some of your reflections, comments, but also questions to our speakers. So let's just go with the flow and see who comes first. Please do say your name, any association, and then your comment, question, or reflection. Please keep it brief as much as you can, and do forgive me if I try to gently stop you. So the floor is open. Just raise your hand or hands. Okay, I'll go here first. Is there another microphone?
Thank you. My question is perhaps notably to the Coffee Foundation, if I may. We are facing in Australia, for instance, a referendum, and this is the first big vote since social media is so important in referendums. And whereas we have rules that discipline public media for a conventional vote, we have no rules that discipline social media in the days preceding the vote. And this will be a real challenge, I think, to avoid misinformation and loss of debate before the vote.
Thank you. Let's take another question. Nick, at the back, please.
Good morning. My name is Breon Wells from the United States. My reflection, which is also then my question, was that one of my concerns is a lack of honest dialogue and transparency at all levels of our society within the U.S. as we're talking about trust and integrity in democracy. So I guess my question is, for the panelists, would you say that you all are having honest dialogue within your society as it relates to trust and integrity? Those things take relationships. Or would you say that there is honest dialogue, whether with young people or with women in society, this space? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more question or comment. I'm looking for a lady. I'm sorry, we'll come back to you.
I'd like to ask the Honorable Mr. Fujita if he has any advice on how we as global citizens can help people in North Africa, for example, who have suffered in achieving democracy and it's been aborted. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to these questions, please, in whichever order? Who would like to go first?
Well, perhaps I'll go first. We'll follow the order then. Thank you for starting with a simple question about the regulation of social media. I mean, in a nutshell, my personal belief and the position of the foundation, we've done some work on this, is that yes, absolutely, we need much more regulation of social media, particularly around elections and referendums. And I'll find you afterwards and send you a report that we did recently that has some very specific examples of steps that can be taken around political advertising, around targeting of ads, and also when they should appear. But I can send you some more info on that. But the other point, though, is that regulation takes time, to go through the process as it should, to write a law, to vet it, to put it in place. It's not something that happens overnight. And there are a number of things that you don't need to wait for regulation. There's a number of, particularly when it comes to disinformation, for example, there's been a lot of really successful civil society-led collaborations in many parts of the world in very different socioeconomic contexts, where you've had electoral management bodies, media and journalists, civil society organizations, fact checkers have come together and put in place some sort of steps or mechanisms where people can flag something that looks like disinformation online, send it to this collaboration to get it checked, and then they can sort of put out whatever the fact may be. So absolutely, I think there needs to be the push for regulation, but you don't need to wait for that. And again, I can send you some info in terms of, I think it's been done quite well in Mexico, and we were doing it in Kenya actually ahead of the last elections, and the Philippines as well. So there's a lot that non-government entities can do by working together around the question of social media. On the question of honest dialogue, while I have the mic, I think, so I'm Irish, I live and work in Switzerland, but I'm Irish, and I would say we're getting better at it. We're getting better at sort of seeing what it is and understanding not only how to do it, but how to do it in such a way that it results in policy change. Because it's one thing, and we've seen this disconnect before, to provide citizens and elected officials with places to come together and talk and share concerns or whatever else. Making that link then to actual policy change is something that, again, through these citizens' assemblies, is actually becoming sort of more normal. So I think we're on the right course. I wouldn't claim that we're there yet.
Okay, thank you, Declan. Yes, please, Your Excellency.
Bien, je voudrais intervenir par rapport.
I would like to intervene on the question from Brian about the absence of dialogue and honest dialogue. I think it's a question of organisation that is important for the country. Some aspects could be subjective. What I consider to be honest and true could be something that other people don't perceive to be honest and true. I would like to talk about an interview that I saw on France 24 last week. I said what I thought, but the way we are managing mine resources in Africa. But one of the political points of view in Niger, we have a framework for dialogue where all the politicians, whether they're from the opposition or from the majority, exchange different fundamental texts. Every year afterwards, with the National Council of Youth, we talk about this, but that is not enough. We can say that there is a framework for dialogue, but it's important to have strong institutions that regulate democracy. They make sure that they have independency. This is not always the case. But people who are trying to seek independence could be led by other politicians. So at the moment, it's a whole process. We are starting, and we want to see that all of these processes are put in place. We have had some good evolutions so that we can take a step in the right direction. Having one part of the majority and having one part of the opposition is not having enemies, but it's looking at what can unite us when there are international interests. It's important to have dialogue and to exchange. now we are looking at the viability of what we are doing. And I think also within this framework of changes, everybody needs to think about what they can take from this exchange. That is also democracy and what we are trying to do in Niger.
If I may try to answer to your question, first thing I would like to say is that Japan is supposed to be a democratic country, but it isn't. The gender equality rank of Japan is something like 168th in the world. Japan did not have any law to protect LGBT people until June last month. The freedom of the press, according to some research, is something like 68th in the world. So Japan is a very much developing country. 3 out of 4 prime ministers has been second, third, fourth generation politicians. 40% of those members of parliament in the ruling party for the last 7 decades are second, third, fourth generation politicians. So we are a developing country. And if I may say so, that those who are said to be democratic countries, I think they are losing the value of some democracies. And having helped countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand, there was a coup in Myanmar after the election. So Aung San Suu Kyi's party now was done by the military. In Cambodia, coup took place before the election, so that the present prime minister has been in power. Now, I'm afraid that we have to deal with democracies in non-democratic countries. And it only needs initiatives of the people. And whatever you can do to care for the people. I did mention this to someone whose father has been in power for many decades. I mentioned about the example of President Assad of Syria. People expected him to be a very democratic leader, as he had been in England and a medical doctor in England. But he became more dictator-like than the father because he had to keep his power. Kim Jong-un of North Korea was studying in Switzerland. So we expected him to use his international experience, but he became more aggressive as he needed to show his power. I think this is a situation that we are now. And we can't just rely on democracy or trust building in democratic countries, but we have to care for those in sort of dictator-like countries. I think we need whatever we can do to help those in power. And the less that they do things bad, the better, even 1 out of 100. And this is what I've been struggling to do. I don't know if I'm answering to your question, but this is my honest answer to your question.
Thank you. Thank you all. Time is up, so I'd like to just use the opportunity to take more questions and answers so that we sit with them. We don't have, it's the beginning of the conversation. So I saw a few hands. Let's capture as many as possible so that we are sitting with these questions. As the days go by, we'll have the conversations. And when we have speakers, just do go to them and approach them, please. So let's start here.
Thank you very much. David Woolcombe, Peace Child International, an international youth organization. And yeah, young people are apathetic. They see that voting doesn't actually make a difference. As one young person said to me, if voting did make a difference, they'd have abolished it long ago. And the fact is, democracy has failed them. Democracy has not given us education for all. It has not supplied health for all. It hasn't dealt with the climate crisis, with the destruction of the biosphere, the triple threats that the Secretary General of the UN talks about. And that failure is because democracy plays to our inner desires. We want to be comfortable. We want to be rich. We want to be successful. And that is contradictory to the needs of the planet. So therefore, trust and integrity in democracy requires that we question whether democracy is the right way to save life on Earth.
Thank you. You put your hands up, please.
My name is Christine Turner from Northern Ireland, and really I recognize what Fujita-san was saying, having lived in Japan for some time, that it would seem to me that many people there, as in my own country, are unaware that they have a democratic voice. As a lifelong educator, I believe that we need to start the change within our education system so that children and young people can grow up understanding that they can have a voice. I do believe that at all stages of education that we can make a difference, but it's very difficult to fight against education systems that focus only on how to take exams.
Yes, please.
Bonjour, c'est Hela Ben Youssouf de Tunisie.
Hello, my name is Hela Biziouf from Tunisia. I've got a question to our guest who spoke first. We're talking about democracy and integrity and values in a family sense, and in the idea that this is a way that we evolve. We've talked about artificial intelligence. I don't want to speak too much about that because that will be part of my speech tomorrow. But with your vision, how do you think that artificial intelligence that has no limit today, no morals, could help us to find integrity within democracy? We can't talk about integrity with what we don't know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Amer Deng Yak from South Sudan. My point is, in South Sudan, the gender-based violence is a lot because the mindset of our men, because they're dominant in our society, political arena, and the women who have managed to come up, they don't have enough space. Although majority are the women in the country because we lost a lot of our brothers, husbands, and now we will have an election next year. Ours is just kind of a democracy, but you cannot tell that it is a democracy. There is a lot of violence. So, and I believe that you are aware of the history of South Sudan since our independence in 2011, and up to now, we have series of conflict. How can you help in that scenario? Because there is a need for awareness for women because they don't know their rights. And then also the conflict has affected the people in a very deep way. Thank you.
Thank you. One more?
Sure, thank you. Wolfgang Jammann, I'm with the International Civil Society Center in Berlin. I have a slightly different view from, I think, two of the speakers in terms of the value of democracy. I think the political principles of liberal democracy is so far the best that many societies in the world would have come up with. I've not seen better systems, and I struggle to imagine better systems. But of course, like, for instance, our honorable speaker from Japan has said, there's a lot of issues to be addressed. Particularly if you look at the map, I mean, 8% of countries enjoy full democracy, and even those countries sometimes lack integrity, lack full participation and the like. So in my mind, we should do everything to strengthen and support the principles of liberal democracy. And my question that I would have, also addressing Declan, you talked about citizen assemblies, citizen councils, things that come up very regularly now. While it sounds great, to bring more participatory approaches into the game. I'm a little bit concerned about the potential undermining of democratic institutions that we have, like parliaments. When you're able to engage in a citizen assembly, very often you already belong to someone who has time, who can do that on a volunteer basis. So it kind of aims at certain elites, and I'm a little bit cautious about this. And it might actually also replace some of the valuable principles of liberal democracy that need to be strengthened through representative assemblies and parliaments and the like. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Are we okay with this? Can we stop, friends? As I said, this is the beginning of the conversation. I could see Tom wanting to respond. We do want to make this a forum and a conversation, and it's not a one-way street from a stage to an audience. So this is my invitation to my colleagues to make as much space for across-the-floor conversation. You are speaking on a panel, so we'll have the chance. You'll be on a panel, we'll have the chance. Hilla is on another panel. Pirun is on a panel. So many of you are here, and let's make the space. So I'd like to stop to respect the time. We're past the time, and just to give our panelists maybe 1 minute, 30 seconds even each, just for quick closing remarks. If you have anything else you would like to add, you don't need to respond to specific questions, but let's sit with the questions. Let's have the conversation, and I'm sounding like I'm closing already. Trust and integrity. This is the initiative change really part. And then we're discussing about democracy. And the founder of Initiatives for Change said, if you want to change the world, the best place to start is yourself. So we all are invited, starting with me, to look at our own trustworthiness, our own integrity, and our own democratic principles in our families, in our work, and in our societies. Please, any last comments, remarks?
On the comment made by you, I think in the democratic countries, the important thing is the power balance between parliament and the bureaucracy. In most of the Western European countries, you have the system of checking accountability of the government, like General Accounting Office of the USA, and various foundations associated with political parties or parliament, or sometimes royal family in UK. The check and balance between the government and elected bodies, somehow checking and making long-term strategic policies. Then some countries like Japan, we don't have those systems. That is one. Second, the question of education. I think the amount of education budget and social welfare budget by which the opportunities of the educations based on the welfare of the parents or income of the parents should be balanced. And I think this is where there are different sort of degrees of care for education and social welfare amongst so-called democratic countries. Having said that, I think since the COVID and the war in Ukraine, you don't have the border between defense and security policies and food policies, energy policies, medical policies. They also have to be dealt with together. Because I'm afraid that there are not only military industries, but industries of food, energy, AI, and medicine who want to make the war in Ukraine longer than possible for their benefits. And we have to deal with those factors together. And the difference between, say, Europe and Asia, geographically, what is happening in Ukraine may happen in Asia, or vice versa. NATO plans to have an office in Tokyo now. French president is opposing it by saying that it's North Atlantic Alliance. Japan is not in the North Atlantic. Now, what I'm saying is that the boundary amongst different types of industries, boundaries between different geographical differences, has now sort of disappearing or becoming less. Therefore, we need more efforts to deal with these basic questions.
Thank you so much. Please, just a brief word.
I won't try and answer those questions now because I don't think we have time, but I would just say this. It is obviously the nature of conversations like this that we tend to focus on what's not going well. And despite all the frustrations that we've talked about this morning and the lack of trust and lack of integrity, I think it's important not to lose sight of the fact that, largely speaking, democracy is still a universal aspiration. And people want more democracy, they want better democracy. It is not the case that we are taking sort of veering to the hard right. It is, I think, our responsibility to talk about ways to improve democracy, to expand it, to reimagine it and strengthen it. So despite everything we've talked about, let's not get too pessimistic, I think.
Well said, thank you. Your Excellency.
Je ne vais pas rentrer dans les détails des dernières questions.
I don't want to go into too much detail with the last questions because I'll be available all day to be able to talk with you and continue this debate. But just to wrap up and take the last words of my colleagues, we must make sure that we are following principles and values. I am a woman just like you, the lady from South Sudan. We need to make sure that we are emerging. We need to make sure that we are working harder than men. Today we have got a certain amount of deprivation where young people need us. But when we look at family education, what are the pillars? Well, in Africa, it's women. So if there is violence within a family, then I hold myself responsible as a woman. Family should be my first responsibility. And far too often we are hiding ourselves. But we must say at every moment, what is my responsibility and what can I do to change things? Since a very young age, this is what I've been trying. I've been refusing to stay at home. I didn't wait to do things. I decided to go to school. I decided to go into politics. And then I've worked with international organisations. I decided to go back to my country to say that I'm going to bring the experience that I have acquired to here. And this is what I started to do. We need to show that we are capable of doing this. This is so that we can make sure there are rights. Democracy is not just one person. Democracy is not just one community. It's you, me, him, her. It's all of us together. We need to believe in the value of sharing, in the value of development. When we do that, that's when we'll be united and we will have an effect. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We were hoping to have a little break before the communities. We still have some quick announcements to make. But let me invite you to thank our panel one more time, please. Thank you very much. And now I'll hand over to my colleague Mark Upstill for some quick announcements. Mark, you can do it here.
Okay. Let me go out there then. Okay, so next thing to talk about is these workshops. There are workshops that you can sign up for, and there's a desk out at the front. So you can find all the details of the conference on the WOVA app, which you will have signed up for, I hope. There's also, as I said, the desk in the reception area by the welcome desk for more information on the app if you need. Concerning the workshops, there's more information on the workshops table. So each sheet has an information section. Or just ask at the welcome table and get the information about the program. So I really would encourage you, for those who have not already, to get the most out of this experience, to keep registering for these workshops and the community groups that you'll hear about in a minute. The workshops are a great way for people to engage on one specific subject and discuss together the issues that are raised. So please do go to that workshop desk where there's more information on each. And for whichever you want to join, you can just enter your name on the sheets if there's still space on that workshop. Just briefly, which ones are coming up today? We've got Susan Riddell, Living the Values of Initiatives of Change. This workshop briefly is an invitation to gain a clearer understanding of what it means to live these values and take on IofC practice as our own. It's about the spirit of Caux, simply articulated so we can take it down the mountain with us when we leave. Sue Riddell's Living the Values of Initiatives of Change. And then we have Dr. Nirmala Pillai, Building Trust in Democratic Institutions for the Successful Handling of Modern Crises. Briefly, this workshop focuses on trust as foundational to the relationship between citizens and residents, including elected law and policymakers. And it's analyzing as a recent example of a crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and what it revealed about trust in democratic countries. That's Dr. Nirmala Pillai, Building Trust in Democratic Institutions Following Crisis. And then there is also in this main hall a look at the role of TV and digital media within democratic societies and the influence that it has, which of course is quite powerful. So looking at the contemporary influence of digital media and television. This is also to remind you about the exposition in the Belle Epoque part of the building about circumpolar art and Aboriginal art. The Australian Aboriginal community has asked us to support in order for their people's voice to be heard. So we invite you to go and read the declaration. Uncle Hewitt or his lovely representative will be at the bottom of the steps as you go out to the terrace there. I now invite Peter Riddell to make a brief announcement for tomorrow evening's program, and then Veronique will tell you about the communities. Thank you. Tell him. Okay, maybe.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Riddell from the disunited kingdom. And I've been given responsibility for pulling together the cultural evening tomorrow.
Thank you.
So I looked up the definition of culture, and one of them was the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement. And the other was the ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. So why have an evening depicting cultures in a conference on democracy? I suggest that one answer is that the political realm tends to divide, whereas I think it's true to say that culture, music, drama, poetry, dance, literature, art tend to bring us together across the divides. Anyway, that's what we hope will happen tomorrow evening, and we're calling it Connecting Through Culture. So I would like to ask you to think if you or someone you know would like to contribute to this evening. I will be just over the side by the stairs, both after each plenary today and tomorrow. And I would just like to ask you to think what you would like to contribute. Now, we can't have everyone contributing, but please put your name forward, and I will try to put together an evening of variety for you all. Okay.
So, once again, you hear my voice. We are going to break into community groups. So we were supposed to begin at 11:30, but we've had an intense morning of important presentations from our speakers, and we really, I believe, relished in all that they had to share and in all that each of you had to share. So right now, if you have not signed up for a community group, I will ask you to go to the community desk to sign up for that. Don't worry about the workshops. Sign up for the community groups. We have 8 to 10 community leaders here in the room. They will get the list at 11:42 sharp. We will come here, all of you. The community leaders will have a sign, for example, one that says, I don't know, Geneva, with their group and the room. It is also marked on the sign-up sheet, but they will lead you to the room with that. So please go sign up if you haven't. If you have, take a short break, but be back here at 11:42 so that we can all go to the community rooms. And everyone is welcome. Thank you so much for sitting here today.